I kicked my mother-in-law out mid-Christmas dinner and my husband said nothing. For 3 years, I had been the one keeping the peace. Every comment she made about my cooking, I smiled through. Every time she rearranged things in my kitchen while I was standing in it, I said nothing. Every Christmas, she'd come and stay for 4 days and leave the house feeling slightly less like mine, and I told myself it was just her way. I had been so reasonable for so long that I think everyone, including my husband Dan, had mistaken my silence for not caring. What Linda does is specific. It's never one big thing. It's 100 small things delivered with a smile that make you feel like you're imagining it. She calls me by the wrong name occasionally, just enough that you can't call it deliberate. She compliments my house by mentioning what she would have done differently. She asks about my job with this particular expression that sits somewhere between polite interest and thinly veiled confusion about why I'm still working. Dan has seen all of it and called it just mum being mum for 7 years, and I had accepted that framing because I loved him. My daughter Rosie is 4. She'd been talking about Christmas for 2 months the way 4-year-olds do, completely consumed by it. I'd spent 3 weeks making the day exactly what she deserved. The table was set beautifully, food I'd been preparing since the day before, Rosie in her Christmas dress sitting between me and my sister Claire, who'd driven 3 hours to be there. Linda arrived on Christmas Eve and by Christmas morning had already suggested twice that I was doing the potatoes wrong. We sat down for dinner and for 20 minutes it was genuinely lovely. Then Linda looked at Rosie pushing food around her plate and said to Dan, loudly enough for everyone to hear, that it was such a shame Rosie had picked up such fussy eating habits, that Dan had never been fussy as a child, and that some children just needed firmer handling at mealtimes. The table went quiet. My sister Claire looked at me. Dan looked at his plate. Rosie looked up confused because she knew something had shifted without understanding what. I put my fork down and asked Linda to repeat what she'd just said. She smiled and said she was just making conversation. I told her she'd implied in front of my 4-year-old that I wasn't handling her properly, and I needed her to acknowledge that. Linda said I was being oversensitive and that Christmas dinner wasn't the place. I told her every place had been the wrong place for 7 years and I was done waiting for the right one. Dan said my name once. I looked at him and he looked away, and that was the moment I understood he wasn't going to say anything else. I told Linda I needed her to leave the table. She laughed and looked at Dan. He was still looking at his plate. She said she wasn't going anywhere, that she was Dan's mother. I told her it was my house and my table and my daughter, and I needed her to get her coat. My sister Claire quietly put her hand over Rosie's on the table. Linda stood up slowly and looked at Dan one more time. He didn't look up. She got her coat and I heard the front door close. Rosie asked if Grandma was coming back. I told her not today, sweetheart, and helped her with her dinner. Dan and I didn't speak properly until Rosie was in bed. He said I'd humiliated his mother on Christmas Day. I told him she'd humiliated me at my own table for 7 years and he'd watched every single time. He said I could have handled it differently. I told him so could he. He didn't have an answer for that. Linda hasn't apologized. Dan is speaking to me but carefully, the way you speak to someone when you're still deciding what you think. Rosie asked this morning if Grandma was cross with her, and I held her for a long time before I answered. Subscribe for more stories.